Hello, come on in, come on in. Today we're going to be watching the Bryan Kohberger hearing together. So come on in, tell me where you're from. Everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion. Please consider subscribing. It's free and it helps me out a lot. Like, share, leave a comment, and this lets the YouTube algorithm know that I am giving you guys credibly sourced information. And this video is for adults only. Viewer discretion is advised. Come on in and tell me where you're from. You can tell me what city, what country, what state.
Guilty knowledge. This is a method that involves, quote, the detection of knowledge about a crime as a means for inferring deception.
Bryan Kohberger also put his trash in neighbors' trash cans. No alibi. Still no alibi.
Can the prosecution show links from Bryan to Maddie?
He was in fact fired.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello,
All right, let's go on the record in State v. Kohberger, CR 0124316665. The defendant has been excused from today's proceedings. It is not present. The defense is represented by Ms. Massoff, Ms. Taylor, and Ms. Barlow. The state is represented by Mr. Thompson. This is a time set for a hearing on the state's supplemental request for restitution. The state can argue first.
Thank you, Your Honor. The attached documentation, it doesn't appear that there's a question about the amounts. I think the question that has been raised is whether there's the propriety of any additional restitution being ordered at this point. Yesterday afternoon, we did receive a supplemental filing from the defense, and I want to respond to that just for the record before I address the merits of the restitution requests themselves. As we indicated in our response to the defense objection to the additional restitution request, at the time that we entered into the plea agreement, Ms. Jennings and I were under the impression that crime victims' compensation could be available to cover reimbursement of travel expenses. And I have to clarify that now. It is true that before trial, the families approached our office asking if there were any resources we were available to pay in advance for travel expenses or expenses related to them attending trial itself. And we looked into that, our staff looked into that, and advised them no. It was my understanding, and I'm mistaken, I realized I was mistaken at this point, but it was my understanding back in early July, late June, when we were talking about the plea agreement, that crime victims compensation could be available to reimburse expenses like that. I now know that's not correct, and it was certainly my mistake. I will own it as far as our state of mind going into the plea agreement. So that being said,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish the point on the plea agreement, and then I have a question for you about that.
And I was just finishing that point, Your Honor, so this would be a good time.
Okay. So it's pretty well settled that plea agreements are interpreted as contracts, which they are. I think it's pretty well settled contract law that a unilateral mistake does not relieve one of its contractual obligations and restrictions. So how can I order this restitution if the express terms of the plea agreement, though mistaken understanding by the state, don't allow such extra crime victims compensation fund reimbursement?
And Your Honor, I recognize that, and that's what I was just getting ready to address. In response to the defense's objection, the state has modified or adjusted our position on the restitution. We are, pursuant to the plea agreement, seeking restitution for the funeral-related expenses, which are the urns that are described in Exhibit 2 to our response. We are not affirmatively advocating for the travel expenses and lodging expenses of the family because we do not believe that we can legally advocate for those. At the same time, the families provided those to us, and we want to provide them to the court and counsel just so everybody was aware that they are there, but we are not arguing affirmatively for that because of the wording of the plea agreement itself. So what the state is actually requesting today is just additional restitution for the funeral-related expenses, which are the urns for the families.
Okay, thank you. And you can address the other issues as well.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, which other issues?
Well, the issues, if you'd like, raised in opposition to your motion, including the lack of ability to pay by a defendant and et cetera.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I apologize. The defendant has raised the issue of his alleged inability to pay, and we recognize that he's going to be incarcerated until he dies. But that in and of itself doesn't mean that over the course of the balance of his life, he might become, he might receive assets. And in fact, we attached a breakdown of the types of monies that he has received during his incarceration. We also noted the statute that allows the treasurer to intercept prospective monies that might be received based on any attempted publication of the story of the defendant. And those, if received, would be something that a restitution order could be enforced against. We also note that the language of the statute and the case law interpreting the restitution statute, which is 1953-04, if I believe off the top of my head, talks about current inability to pay is not necessarily a block to the order of restitution. It's just merely a factor for the court to consider. And it is our position, given the relative youth of the defendant, the fact that he has been receiving significant monies during his incarceration already, and that there is a possibility of future monies, whether by virtue of the statute with the treasurer impounding proceeds from a story related to this, or perhaps from an inheritance from his family or others. We can't see into the future. We don't have a perfect crystal ball. The state's position is having this additional restitution in place, which is really fairly minimal, would be appropriate. And have them available that if the defendant comes into assets, that the families would be able to try to satisfy the restitution orders from them.
Thank you. And then who's arguing for defense?
I will be, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you. Given that the state has clarified its position that it's only seeking reimbursement for the earns, it's my understanding that that amount is $1,420 for one family, $1,587.79, and then another $167.79, which would be a total, I believe, if my math is right, of $3,075.58. My understanding of reading the Victims Compensation Code 1953-04 is that the court must still do an analysis on Mr. Kohberger's ability to pay. And as the state has addressed, we are arguing that he does not have an ability to pay. While there have been lump sums provided to you regarding some funds that he received prior to his plea agreement, what the court does not have is a breakdown of how those funds came into the inmate system for his expenses and the fact that they were primarily family. Certainly his situation pre-plea and sentencing was drastically different than it is right now in terms of money that is available to him. And there's nothing in the record to provide the court with anything other than what is really speculation based on the past, as opposed to something that the court might be able to rely upon about foreseeability. There's no way that Mr. Kohberger is ever going to profit from any sort of movie or book because Idaho Code 1953-01 specifically precludes that.
Well, it precludes, it allows that monies are swept from his account for those income to pay certain things. If those certain things, if there's no debt for those certain things, then does the money not go then to the defendant?
That is not my reading of the code. Perhaps I'm reading that statute more broadly than the court is. I understood it to be that the purpose is that someone can't then profit off of their crime pursuant to that statute. I guess I need to read it with
even allowing your reading of it, what's to prevent, for example, a family member from agreeing to, provide information, be a part of, et cetera, a story, movie, book, whatever, TV series about the murders, about Mr. Kohberger, and that certainly wouldn't be, monies they receive wouldn't be subject to the statute, and then they certainly would be free to send Mr. Kohberger money to his account. What harm is it to order the restitution, which would then sort of jump in line in terms of priority of payments over some of the other ordered payments, such that if Mr. Kohberger does receive money into his accounts from any source, that he's then, that those monies are then put to that use. Certainly, we're not worried about Mr. Kohberger's credit rating with having debts at this point. I'm not sure what the concern would be to, given the uniqueness of this case and the potential for family members, et cetera, to earn money from it, and potentially we've seen members of the public send money to Mr. Kohberger, is my understanding, to his books. What's the downside to ensuring that the victims are as whole as possible from this by ordering the restitution, which again would jump in line from some of the other court-ordered fines, et cetera? And if the money's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not.
Judge, I don't see that Idaho code or Idaho law asks the court to make an analysis on the downside, but whether or not there is foreseeability of payment. And all of the things that you just listed are pure speculation. There is no book or movie that's in the works by any of his family, and to say that those things are going to happen is absolutely speculative, and there's nothing to substantiate those sorts of assertions happening in the future. So
well, there's a history in the 3 years he was incarcerated of him receiving 5 figures put on his books. Doesn't that give the court some history to suggest that such contributions from whatever source may continue into the future?
As I stated earlier, Judge, that was at a different time in the case. That was at a time when, he had not entered a plea. He was not deemed convicted of the crime. The money, a lot of that money was coming from his family to be able to have communications with their son and brother. And to speculate that those types of dollars are going to be able to happen for the next many decades is exactly that. It's pure speculation, not based on something that is foreseeable or based in something that's in fact before this court.
Well, it just seems to me that one of the, really, obviously, even application of statute requires the court to look at what might happen into the future. And I guess, it seems to me one of the best indicators of the future is the past. And in the past, his family has, you're saying the family was the source of much of these funds, has provided him funds in order for him to communicate, et cetera. That necessity will still exist going forward. I'm not aware of his family having disowned him at this point and not wanting any contact with him. And even if they are, that doesn't mean that won't change. And you call it speculation. It seems to me that it is good evidence of what may occur in the future in light of what has occurred in the past.
Well, Judge, there is a judgment against him in the amount of $28,000, and certainly 20% of every dollar that goes into his inmate account is going to go towards paying that $28,000. Another factor that the court actually can look at under 1953-04 subsection 7 is other factors, and those factors that other factors that the court deems appropriate, and that can be collateral resources that the families obtained over $200,000, which definitely reimburse the cost of the earns in terms of economic costs.
I also want to turn to the plea agreement, because isn't a reasonable interpretation of the plea agreement that the defendant will not contest the state's seeking of restitution that is outlined in the plea agreement? Otherwise, why would it need to be in the plea agreement? It seems to me it's the plea agreement, a reasonable interpretation is the defendant is agreeing to pay restitution for those items that are identified in the plea agreement, which includes victims' compensation, which includes in this case funeral expenses. So you took advantage of the plea agreement to get the benefit of the bargain regarding the state's dropping of the death penalty. Why should you not be held to the plea agreement to pay the victims the costs of interning their children?
Judge, I believe that our pleading was clear, that we understood that urns fell underneath a funeral cost, but that once we have a hearing on this matter, that doesn't eliminate the court's duty under 1953-04 to do the ability to pay analysis. And that's why.
Well, are you in violation of the plea agreement by arguing that your client shouldn't have to pay those?
We are not in violation of the plea agreement. If there was any violation of the plea agreement that took place, it's the state seeking this when the other expenses, when it was clear under statute and under the Idaho Victims Compensation rules that those were not reimbursable expenses.
But they've effectively withdrawn those requests and are seeking what's outlined in the plea agreement. What's the point of the plea agreement on restitution if the defense is able to argue against the restitution called for in the plea agreement itself?
Judge, again, in our pleading, we objected to what the state has withdrawn as of this moment at this hearing today.
Right.
We acknowledge that the urns were funeral expenses.
Right.
But once we're in this situation of having a hearing, then this other section about whether or not he has an ability to pay is triggered. We stipulated to $28,000 in restitution within 60 days.
Right.
He met the terms of the plea agreement.
But it also says the state may seek restitution regarding funeral expenses, and they're simply identifying additional funeral expenses.
I don't know what more you want me to say about the urns other than
what's the point of the plea agreement if you're not going to be bound by it?
I agreed that it was $3,075.58.
But you say you just shouldn't have to pay it.
What I said was that the court needs to do the analysis under Idaho code about his ability to pay.
Why hasn't the defendant waived his right to rely on that ability to pay by agreeing to those expenses as part of the plea agreement?
I don't know how the court can enter this order today without engaging in the analysis under Idaho code because it's required. That's the way I review the case law and the code, that once there's a hearing about restitution, then the court has to engage in the analysis on the ability to pay.
So the agreement to pay is illusory.
No, he agreed to $28,000. We've agreed that the urns fall underneath.
Does he have the ability to pay that?
No, he does not have the ability.
So why did you agree to it?
Because it was a specific, we were provided with those receipts within 60 days. We were not provided with the receipt for the urns within 60 days.
So is your objection then a timeliness objection?
We did raise a timeliness objection in our pleading. I have thought about that and whether or not I think that it is a really valid argument to say that that's completely jurisdictional. I didn't to mean that the court can't take this under the review at this point in time. I didn't read the judgment language in such a strict fashion that I felt like we could say 61 days means the court's not going to not going to consider it at all. So it is past your 60-day deadline, but I don't know that that is completely jurisdictional in the way that you drafted your judgment.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, any rebuttal?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll take the matter under advisement, issue an opinion in due course.
Okay. Show them the money, Sirius Black says. Oh my gosh. So in due course, does that mean he's coming right back, or are we done for the day? It looks like he's going to issue his opinion, but it's going to be at a later date, not right now. Let's put this up because I think he does owe the money. I know some people have made videos that say that he doesn't, but this was part of his plea agreement that he would pay this money. The judge seems to be agreeing. And let's hear what Nancy Grace has to say. So come on in, tell me where you're from. Let's talk about this.
Susan, Bryan Kohberger, we're not just supposing, we're not hypothesizing. Bryan Kohberger pled guilty to 4 murders. They were worse than murders. They were slaughters of 4 innocent college students, University of Idaho. And now, do I have this right, Susan Hendricks? He then goes home, boils himself in the shower, takes a few selfies. Hey, control room, can I see the shower selfies he took like an hour after he gets home to his apartment in Pullman? With the thumbs up, all fresh and clean from the quadruple murder. And then he goes out to Costco to Price Shop and get an expensive cup of coffee. Do I have that right, Susan Hendricks?
Yes, and by the way, before taking that selfie, he goes back to the crime scene a little after 9 a.m. Was it to look for the evidence he left behind? And we do know that he called his mother as well. But Wright just goes into Costco. He wasn't able to get inside. I don't know if he didn't know you needed a card to get in, but he's just acting like it's a normal day after slaughtering, as you said, 4 college students.
Yeah, you need a card to get into Costco. Okay, I'm going to show you the video of him in Costco. He is drinking out of a water bottle. There he goes. And watch this. Yep, hide that left hand. Hide that. He keeps that in his left pocket. I'm surprised he didn't go off on the female Costco person, the diminutive lady there with the blonde ponytail. He's like, what? I need a card to get in Costco? Yeah, Kohberger. You need a card. It says Costco on it. Allison Paganelli joining us, board certified forensic psychologist affiliated with.
All right, so you do need to get a card. Now, I think this was part of BK's alibi. I think that he wanted to establish an alibi for himself. If you're just joining me, Judge Hippler just clapped back at the defense team who was trying to argue that BK did not, should not have to reimburse families. And his argument back to the defense team was, isn't this part of your plea agreement? Didn't Bryan Kohberger, who got the benefit of a plea agreement, he didn't have to face capital punishment, wasn't part of his plea agreement to make restitution to the families of the victims? And, what the defense team is trying to say is that BK had no ability now or in the future to pay. And the judge and the prosecution pointed out he could get an inheritance from his parents. There could be a book deal or a movie deal, and he needs to pay the victims' families back. We're watching Nancy Grace together, but if you didn't get to see our favorite judge, Judge Hipp, just back up the live stream. You could watch that too.
Park Dietz and Associates, 18 years of experience. Allison, I'm not a shrink, I'm just a JD, but who goes from a slaughterhouse where you murder 4 people to price shopping in Costco?
Well, it's hard to say why he was doing those things right after slaughtering college students. He could have been trying to get some security footage of him looking like just a regular guy. He might have been kind of sniffing around to see if anybody recognized him or had tied him to the crime yet. It is unusual
I'm
that
thinking more about
after
the mind of someone that could pull this off. But you brought up a really good point. I'm going to circle back to you because I got to go throw this to Eric Faddis. Eric Faddis is a veteran criminal defense attorney joining us, TV legal analyst, founding partner, Varner Faddis Elite Legal, and former felony prosecutor. We know what he was doing, Faddis. I believe Allison took me quite literally. I want her to go into the mind, like who can do that? Faddis, clearly he's trying to establish an alibi. See him all clean and crisp and bright and shiny here in Costco. Who could do that? Well, him. He could do that because we know he's already admitted to doing it. But he was trying to establish an alibi, and now I've got the footage to show it.
Yeah, Nancy, I mean, when it comes to an alibi, you have to be seen by someone. You have to have an alibi witness. You have to have some evidence that you were somewhere else. And so, yeah, it makes sense strategically to try and go out and be seen and be on camera and find people who view you, who would say, hey, yeah, I saw him at Costco. He couldn't have been conducting these heinous murders.
So the same guy who is, acting all cool and casual at Costco, making sure he's seen on the security cameras. I mean, there's no reason. I think he also got rid of the knife in either the Snake River or the Clearwater River, which is down here in Clarkston, which is near the Costco. And why drive 40 something minutes just to get on camera? I think it was also to get rid of the knife, but also to just look like he's out and about. Look, I'm fine. Nothing to see here. It's the same weirdo that took, the thumbs up selfie and took these other photos of himself. Who takes pictures of themselves like this? I mean, would you take pictures of yourself in some of the poses that you've seen him in? I'm just like looking for some of the shots. I mean, there's the victims, Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana, with their roommates Dylan and Bethany. And then we have this guy, here I am giving myself a big thumbs up after what I just did, smiling, looking really proud of myself. And then he posts these. I mean, this is weird, right? No, anybody else think this is odd that this is what he's posting? Anyway, let's go back to this because I do want to hear more about this.
Allison Paganelli joining us, board certified forensic psychologist. So what I'm asking you is, how do you switch gears like that? Most people would be upset about what had just happened. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I've seen rookie cops vomit on a murder scene where there was just one dead body, much less 4 people slaughtered. I mean, for Pete's sake, Kelly Gonsalves was disfigured. She was stabbed over 30 times in the face. And then he is all bright and shiny going into Costco. What kind of mind can do that?
Well, first I want to say I've never met Bryan Kohberger. I've never evaluated him. But for some people who meet criteria for a psychopathic personality, research has shown that the part in their brain, the amygdala, which is activated when something's highly emotional, that their amygdala doesn't function like the rest of us. They're not as scared of things as we are. I do find it odd that he was involved in such a physical crime and then to go, as you said, casually saunter around these stores. The adrenaline alone, you would think would keep him from doing that. But clearly this is planful behavior, and it's not that he was, numbed out and didn't know what he did. This was a plan for an alibi, but let's just say his amygdala wasn't firing as it should have.
And this is a very strange person. This is really strange. Like, who poses for let's do a poll. Do you guys pose for selfies of yourself?
Again, I'm not diagnosing him with anything.
Do you pose for selfies like some of the ones I just showed you? Anybody else? Just yes or no. Do you take pictures of yourself in the bathroom with like that? Like, with Betsy says mother wouldn't like it. Yeah. I agree. Michael says no. Syria says no. Enja says no. I mean, do you guys take pictures like that? I mean, I don't. Bless says he looks so gross, he gives me the creeps. Yeah. If you're just joining me, we just aired the hearing. Just back up the live stream so you can see it. Our favorite judge, Judge Hip, as we call him on this channel, is presiding, and it's definitely worth watching.
I've never met him, but that's my best guess.
Chris McDonough joining us, Director Cold Case Foundation, former homicide detective with over 300 homicides under his belt. Star of the Interview Room on YouTube. Chris, I hear what Allison Paganelli is saying about the amygdala. Don't care. I don't even really know what that means. She's saying a part of his brain doesn't fire, in other words, function the way ours does. That is not legal insanity. That's not even a mental defect. I hear her. I don't doubt her. But I mean, balls the size of coconuts. That's how I would diagnose it. Because this guy admits, we know he did it. He admitted in court. He slaughtered 4 people, 3 girls and 1 sleeping guy. And now he's, as I said, sauntering through the aisles. He's going into a grocery store for coffee because that first alibi thing didn't work out, where he wanted to go up and down the aisles of Costco and get caught on every single surveillance camera they've got. So then he had to go somewhere else. I mean, what is this guy?
He is also continuing to make conscious decisions, Nancy. If you notice, when he comes into Costco, his shirt is untucked, it's disheveled, his right rear pocket is inside out. You know, did he play a game like, oh, I forgot my wallet? But then when you see him at the coffee shop, he has made a decision to tuck in his shirt and walk through that coffee shop. So he is consciously thinking about.
I mean, look at his back pocket. You can see the back pocket's turned inside out. So he's not that pulled together as what he probably thinks that he is.
His appearance. And I still believe, you know, at this moment, he's playing a game.
What game?
The game of, you know, you're not going to catch me. And this goes towards his consciousness of guilt, that he's thinking through every move that he makes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is the same thing that we're seeing, in my opinion, on, you know, in this court hearing, where he had got the benefit, as the judge said, of the plea deal. So he doesn't have to face capital punishment. He doesn't have to face what he did, right, with the jury of his peers. But then when it comes time to pay the families, the victims' families, which is covered in his plea agreement, where he's supposed to be paying restitution to the family members, now all of a sudden he doesn't want to do that. And his attorneys are, you know, are running back into court to say that, you know, they don't want to pay it. And the judge clapped back on that. He just wasn't having it. I don't think that Bryan Kohberger is going to be allowed to not make future restitution just because the defense team is claiming that he has no ability now or in the future to pay restitution. The judge pointed out he could get, you know, or the prosecution pointed out he could get an inheritance from his family. He could get a book deal. He could get a movie deal. There's no son of Sam law that protects, that says a person can't profit off of their crimes while they're in prison. So of course there's money. And if there wasn't money, he wouldn't be running back into court trying to get out of paying the family members of the victims. Or maybe this is just his way of harassing the families of the victims even more, because the whole point of this plea deal was supposed to be that this was over for the family members, right? That we wouldn't have to come back to this time after time after time. But, you know, Bryan Kohberger is obviously not going to let it rest. And I think the judge, you know, he's violating his terms of his plea agreement by refusing to make restitution. And I think, you know, the judge should absolutely just say, if he's not going to pay restitution, then he needs to stand trial. And if he has to stand trial, then the fact that he pled guilty to this crime would come in before a jury. because what he's trying to do is absolutely ridiculous. What do you guys think? I'm just really curious. If you're watching, come on up and talk to me. I'm just really curious what you guys have to say on that. Hey, Laverne. So thank you for modding today, Mike and Sirius and Njaz. Who else is modding today? Drop me a comment if you're modding. Dee Dee's modding. Just looking for mods. Thank you so much to all of our awesome mods. Kathy's modding. And I know some people said, said that it was, that the family members weren't entitled to this, but they are. They are entitled to this because this is part of the plea deal that Bryan Kohberger made. So they are entitled to restitution. This was part of the plea agreement. This isn't something where they're coming in after the fact to try to get this. This is something that the judge said. This is something that Bryan Kohberger agreed to do. And now he's backtracking. And Dee Dee says, it's all about him, his feelings. He's such a snowflake and a crybaby. It makes me so mad when he puts the kids and the families through. Yeah. I mean, this is supposed to be done. This is supposed to be over. He wouldn't even show his face in court today. He didn't even show his face. But, Ann Taylor and Becca Barlow and Alyssa Massoff had to go in and argue this. And, Alyssa Mathos said that there was a law against it. The judge didn't sound like he was interpreting that way. He felt like there was room for Bryan Kohberger to make money in Idaho. And again, here's my question. Let's all put our critical thinking hats on here. Here's my question. Thank you for modding today, Michael. My question is this. If there was no money for Bryan Kohberger to get, and nothing to lose, then why is he in court fighting this? If you absolutely know with 100% certainty that there is not going to be any money for you to ever give the family members, ever, then why do you care? Why are you sending your defense team in to try to go against what you agreed to in the plea deal? So he wants the benefit of the plea deal, but not the responsibility of the plea deal. And in my opinion, this man has never had to be responsible. This is the first time in his life that he's being held responsible for what he did. And I think the judge is going to hold his feet to the fire. I really do. Branick said, I'm surprised he didn't want to get out of prison for a few hours and go to the hearing himself, unless he wasn't allowed to. I don't know. He opted not to. Heather said he can make money. There are loopholes. Exactly. If there was no way to make money, then guess what? He wouldn't be fighting this. Of course there's money. There's a book deal. There's a movie deal. There's something on his periphery that he wants for his commissary. And right now, a percentage of his commissary is going to the victim. So he wants the benefit of the plea deal, which is he doesn't have to face a jury. He doesn't have to have his father explain why he flew across the country to help Bryan Kohberger drive the Hyundai Elantra back to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. He doesn't have to have his mother explain the conversations that she had in those multiple phone calls that Bryan Kohberger made to her, including one while he's driving back to the 1122 King Road home.
Learning that Kelly Gonsalves' sister confronts the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, that dropped the ball and whipped out on the death penalty, about what really happened to her sister. Listen.
Olivia Gonsalves asked Bill Thompson if there's any possibility the victim's autopsy photos could wind up plastered across the internet, and Thompson warns her of his fears of a leaker in their department who has yet to be caught. Olivia,
I just wanted to clarify something. That's not what my understanding of what Olivia said. Olivia said that he said that he did not feel concerned about the prosecution leaking it, or that he did not feel concerned that police officers or law enforcement would leak it. He was concerned that somebody on he couldn't speak for the defense team. That's what he said, according to Olivia.
Makes the difficult decision to view the state's exhibits from Kaylee's autopsy, wanting to be prepared in case she ever ran into them unexpectedly. Olivia learns that what she was led to believe were defensive wounds may have been something else entirely.
something else entirely, not defensive wounds. In a nutshell, to Chris McDonough, you've seen defensive wounds on murder victims probably since day one. They can be on your arms, your hands when you try to fight off an attacker. If the victim goes into a fetal position, you will see defensive wounds even on their knees and their legs, where they're trying to curl up and fight off the attacker. What defensive wounds would you have expected on the victims in this case?
You would see them on their hands because, they're placing their hands up into a position to prevent, a knife in this case. You would probably get them here on the forearms as well. And you'd be able to tell, post-mortem, if they were post-mortem or if they actually occurred during the homicide itself.
So now we are hearing through the Gonzalez family that some of the wounds may have been interpreted as defensive, but they're not. Listen.
I don't want to be doing this, but no.
This is Kaylee's sister, Olivia Gonzalez.
No one on the state side is standing up and giving details like this, and I get it to some extent, but it's creating like massive amounts of chaos. The gag order protected an absolute monster. It's disgusting.
Olivia Gonzalez flies to Idaho for a face-to-face meeting with Bill Thompson to get answers to lingering questions about her sister's murder. The prosecutor goes over the full list of Kaylee's wounds with Olivia, and the two discuss his decision not to take the case to trial. Olivia and her family still do not agree with the plea deal.
Susan Hendricks, to think that the sister of Kaylee Gonzalez, oh, by the way, some of that was from Olivia Gonzalez on TikTok, has to get on a plane at her own expense and fly to ask the prosecutor questions because she can't get answers about what happened to her sister. That's crying shame.
Yeah, we're coming up on 3 years, Nancy, and to think they still don't have the answers they want. And what comes out of Bill Thompson's mouth always shocks me. What do you mean they could be leaked? What about the gag order? So Olivia decides, I'm going to go there by myself, take control, look at the photos just in case they're leaked. That happened in Delphi. It can happen. So she looked at her sister, if you can imagine, stabbed 34 times. Some of the wounds, as Chris was saying, there's some defensive wounds. Some of them were not defensive, investigators are saying. And they told her they could be experimental. I think the minute he got on campus in Washington State, he was obsessed with committing this crime. And I believe it, that they could be, quote unquote, experimental.
Listen.
So it's really, really heartbreaking that Olivia did have to go, but I don't want to mischaracterize what happened because Bill Thompson didn't say that he was worried about his office, according to what Olivia said in an interview that she did. He didn't say that he was worried about what his office was going to leak. He was worried that something could leak from the defense. He couldn't promise that. He couldn't control that. Hey, Tara. Thanks for modding today. Dee Dee says, Olivia rocks. And Michael's asking to please like, share, and subscribe. Hey, Kaloa. Yeah, he is. Thank you for modding today, Michael. How are you feeling, Mike? Mike's been sick. I don't want to say too much, but I hope you're feeling better. Let me just say that. All right, so that's where we are with this. Let's keep going. I do love seeing the pictures of Maddie and there's Xana in the background, and I think Kaylee's ducked down here in the front.
To Olivia
There she is.
Gonzalez.
Some of the wounds that were made to Kaylee were described as experimental. So a wound that might typically, in its presentation, look defensive, might not have necessarily been defensive because at some point he was inflicting wounds that, any logical person would know wouldn't be fatal. So I don't want to speculate on, what exactly he was doing, whether it was to, just cause pain or whatnot. But
Oh my goodness, I feel so sad that for the family members of the victims, especially Olivia. God bless her.
Yeah.
That's from Olivia Gonzalez on TikTok. Now let's analyze what she just said. Some of the wounds made to her sister Kaylee were described as, quote, experimental. It could have presented as a defensive wound, but now the theory is they were experimental. In other words, inflicting wounds that anyone would know are not fatal for what the joy of causing the pain. With us, a renowned board-certified forensic pathologist, anatomic pathologist, Dr. Priya Banerjee with Anchor Forensic Pathology Consulting. Dr. Priya, thank you for being with us. What are experimental wounds, and how can you identify them or differentiate them from defensive wounds?
You really have to look at why were there so many wounds. And the most important thing is,
and I'm airing this because I want everybody to know what these family members have been through and are still going through because of Bryan Kohberger.
As Chris McDonough said, you can differentiate ante-mortem wounds, meaning when she was physiologically alive, to post-mortem wounds, right? Which means whether there's bleeding with the wounds or not. And then we get into how deep are they, and are they injurious, or are they almost like a torture, right? So very superficial, repeated wounds. We see that in torture cases, but now if they don't have bleeding with them, is he getting some sort of joy by just repeatedly stabbing her or hurting her, even if she's basically passed away?
Experimental wounds.
So I just did want to go through what he, some of what he did, because I just don't want this to be whitewashed away, that somehow, I just don't want this to be whitewashed. Tara says, I was back in the hospital. Oh, I'm so sorry. They finally found out what's been going on with me after all this time. I'm having ghost seizures. Oh, that sounds really scary. I hope you feel better. Yeah, I agree with you, Jen. Really, really sad. I hope you feel better, Tara. Sending you prayers and love. Heather says, Olivia is so well spoken. She is really an inspiration. Yes, she is. I want to thank Heather for being a channel member for 7 months. She says, great coverage and amazing mods. We do have amazing mods. Lori Dart is here. Welcome, Lori. Thank you for modding today. So yeah, I think I just don't want to whitewash what the family members are going through. I think it's important to just say, yes, she is. You're right, Kathy. I just think it's important to say that, this is the family members have been through a lot, right? If you're just joining me, back the live stream up to watch Judge Hippler clapping back at the defense team when they tried to say that Bryan Kohberger would never have any money to be able to make the restitution, and therefore, why should he have to pay it? And the judge's clapback was, he agreed to this in his plea deal. This is part of the plea deal. He agreed to make restitution. So he wants the benefits. This is according to Judge Hippler. He wants the benefits of the plea deal without the responsibilities of making it. And I think that this man, Bryan Kohberger, has never had to be responsible for anything. I don't think he's ever been held accountable or for a day in his life. And I just, do think it's important to just share what the family members of the victims have gone through and are still going through. Let's continue on together, shall we?
Are typically injuries created in a controlled setting, for instance, to study wound healing or test therapies like tissue repair or blood coagulation or inflammation. But to you, Chris McDonough, that's not why experimental wounds were inflicted in this case, is it?
No, not at all, Nancy. And what's probably occurring here is, remember, he is executing his fantasy, and nothing is going his way. And so the fact that if those are post-mortem wounds, as Dr. Priya was talking about, then you would expect to kind of connect that either A, to his fantasy, or B, to his learning for the next victim. I.e., if he got away with this, he would try to do something else to the next victim because he just learned from these 4 victims.
And I do believe that Bryan Kohberger did have plans for more victims. I do want to say, let me take this banner down. We're going to continue watching this, but I just do want to just take a breath and just say thank you to NJAS, our executive producer. She just became an executive producer here on Reporter Room in the last 10 days. So thank you so much, NJAS. I want to thank our producers, Sasha Angel, George Brown, Michael L. Cole, Christy Ballantyne, and Randall Rand, and also our amazing channel members. Thank you so, so much. If you would like to be a channel member, the holidays are coming up and you want to treat yourself to something nice, consider hitting the join button. It's next to the subscribe button, but subscribing is free and it helps me out too. So Bryan Kohberger was already ordered by the judge to pay approximately $290,000 in initial restitution, fines, and civil judgments as part of his plea deal. This plea deal allowed him to avoid facing a trial. It allowed him to keep his parents off the stand. It allowed him to not have to face capital punishment. But and the prosecution made a new motion, which they are allowed to do under the terms of the plea deal, asking for additional $20,400 for the Gonzalez family and roughly $7,000 for Maddie Mogen's family. And Bryan Kohberger, who's probably never had to face any type of responsibility in his life, doesn't want to pay. He doesn't want to pay his responsibilities. He just wants to be able to skate on by and keep all his commissary money for himself. And the defense team, it was like almost embarrassing, and I guess they have to come out and defend him, but it was almost embarrassing to watch the defense team try to argue this when they've already agreed in the plea deal. And Bryan Kohberger, of course, didn't show his face during the hearing. He's not going to show up and actually take responsibility for anything. It's just embarrassing to watch the defense team just have to, humiliate themselves, asking for something and asserting that BK had, quote, no ability now or in the future to pay restitution as he's serving 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now, the judge clapped back on that and said he could get an inheritance. He could have a book deal. There's no son of Sam law in Idaho that prevents Bryan Kohberger from profiting from his crimes. Alyssa Massoff tried to say that the judge was not interpreting it that way. And, my question for those of you, and this channel does have really smart critical thinkers on it. We do have the smartest viewers, I believe. And, my question to you guys, all of you awesome critical thinkers out there, if there was no money for Bryan Kohberger to get, right? If there was no money for him to receive, then why is he trying to get out of it? If there wasn't any money for Bryan Kohberger to make, why is he trying to weasel out of paying the restitution that he agreed to as part of his plea deal? What do you guys think? If you think that, and the judge now, he said he's going to rule on it. He's going to take it under advisement. So I expect to get a ruling from the judge later this week on this, but I don't think he's going to suddenly rule that just based on the way that he was questioning the defense team. I do not expect him to rule that Bryan Kohberger is suddenly absolved from his responsibilities on his plea deal by saying that, he doesn't have to pay restitution to the family members of the victims because he will never be able to make money. One of his questions back to the defense team was, how do you know he won't make money? How do you know he, doesn't get an inheritance from his family? How do you know that that there's no way he can get money? But I think what Bryan Kohberger is seeing is a percentage of his money. And I think whoever is putting money on his commissary, let's do a poll. If you guys think that whoever is putting money on Bryan Kohberger's commissary should have to, that those names should be made public, put a 1 in the chat. Let's do a poll. If you think that whoever's putting money on Bryan Kohberger's commissary, it should be private and we should never find out their names, put a 2 in the chat. What do you say? Tony says 1, Lori says 1, Njaz says 1, Michael says 1. What do you think? Chris-Ann says 1, Kai says 1, Heather says some content creators are sending him money. That is. Let's find out. I'd love to know who. Kathy says 1. Dee Dee says 1. I just don't think this has to be a secret. There's no reason to have a secret as to who's supporting Bryan Kohberger at this point. Disarray Ray says 1. Ann says 1. Sirius Black says 1. Tara says 1. Laverne says 1. Veronica says 1. I want to see if Ann Taylor is donating, and she has an LOL. Yeah, I'd like to know that too. Thank you so much for your input on that. I did really want to see what you guys think. We are watching, we just finished watching the hearing with Judge Hippler, and Lori says the FOIA will tell us. Yes, we need to find out. Patty put a 1. We need to find out who is, Mike says, I wonder. We need to find out who is giving money to this commissary. Let's continue on with Nancy Grace, though, because we are learning more. And I just think it's, we've had this gag order in place. I just do want to, and we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary. November 13th will be the 1-year anniversary of what happened to these precious Idaho students. I will be doing a 1-year anniversary show. So please make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss that, in honor of Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana.
Know the full extent of it, but boy, are we learning coming up on 3 years.
These wounds didn't necessarily make a lot of sense. They were described to me as experimental.
This is Kaylee's sister, Olivia, if you're just joining us, who did go down to Idaho, met with Bill Thompson, and did view pictures of her sister.
And on Kaylee specifically, there was evidence that he continued the attack after she was no longer even fighting back. So just in light of that, just because there's a wound on a hand or a wound on a forearm or a wound on a wrist, these really, really classic defensive places, unfortunately we just can't make that assumption.
From Olivia Gonsalves on TikTok.
Okay, so that is Olivia Gonsalves on TikTok. Let me fast forward over the ad that she's coming in with.
Reporter, he's now saying, I owe the victims nothing.
It's despicable. Recently, Stacy Chapin, Ethan Chapin's mom, says soon after the murder, she stood outside of that house knowing her son was inside. And in the court documents, you see that Ethan was stabbed more. There were some wounds on his hands. It's not clear if it happened that night. But think about the excruciating pain they all are going through to this day. It'll never.
Yeah, the family members never, the family members are, still going through all of this. And Bryan Kohberger caused all of this. So the idea that he could just weasel out of his plea deal agreement where he agreed to make restitution because the public decided to send money to the GoFundMe is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. And on top of that, the family members, like the Gonsalves family, refunded the GoFundMe money. So you can't have it both ways. I noticed the defense did not bring that up today. So maybe they learned that, the Gonsalves family refunded and decided not to. Maybe they didn't want to drag the Gonsalves family into this by trying to say that they already got it. But in their written arguments, they argued that the victims' families had already received significant funds through public GoFundMes, but they failed to mention, the defense team failed to tell the truth and say that that these victims' family members had refunded the GoFundMe money when they were caught off guard, finding out that Bryan Kohberger had been granted a plea agreement.
Go away. And he's mentioning GoFundMes. Yeah, he doesn't have a job in prison, but why mention the GoFundMes and still trying to bring down the families of what he did? I don't think, obviously, clearly, he's not sorry at all, and it's disgusting.
What is that? Joining me, Eric Faddis, veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney. How did his lawyers even let him make this statement? I owe the victims nothing. And now contesting, he's got his lawyers on board. They're contesting that he owes restitution.
Yeah, why would Ann Taylor, Alyssa Massoff, and Becca Barlow not advise him, or is he, forcing them to do this? I don't know. Let me know what you think, but it is really gross in light of what he did to Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. In light of the fact that he got this sweetheart plea deal where he doesn't have to face capital punishment, and now he wants to weasel out of his restitution, which he agreed to in the plea deal. So the judge pointed out, he wants the benefit of the plea deal. He wants the benefit, but not the responsibility of it. You don't get to have it both ways.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly a touchy issue and an egregious case here. But, in terms of our system, we got to make sure we're being fair to both sides, even somebody who's unpopular, even somebody who might be seen as despicable. His lawyers are arguing that there is a plea agreement, which is essentially a contract, which dictates the restitution he has to pay. And these travel expenses are not included in that. Further, he's saying that, hey, these folks did not have an actual economic loss because they were reimbursed from the GoFundMe pages. And so that would essentially be like a double dipping situation. So, a touchy argument to make, but they've got to go to bat for their client.
Are you actually accusing the 4 victims' families of double dipping?
I'm not personally accusing them of anything, but what I'm saying is defense is looking at this as, hey, if they already got paid, then they didn't suffer an actual economic loss.
But the thing is, and maybe this guy isn't aware of it, and not, if you're not following the case closely, you may not be aware of it, but the family members refunded the GoFundMe donations. So it's not double dipping. You can't have them. And also, I don't think the public gave donations to family members to absolve Bryan Kohberger of his financial responsibilities. If they want to donate to the family members, that's between the public and the family members. It has nothing to do with Bryan Kohberger or his defense team. It's none of his business. But the idea that they're double dipping when they refunded the GoFundMe is just absolutely beyond the pale. It's just another way, in my opinion, to torture and harass these family members.
If they already got the travel expenses reimbursed from the GoFundMe, then any additional funds going to them would not be owed and would not be appropriate to sort of gouge.
Oh, really? What about the funeral? What about the funeral expenses, Faddis? Have you thought about that?
That part is different. That is expressly referenced within.
It isn't different, though, because the GoFundMe donations were refunded. And anybody who knows this case, and I guess this attorney doesn't, but anybody who knows this case knows that the Gonzalez's GoFundMe, they refunded it.
The plea agreement as an item of restitution that Kohberger is going to have to pay. And so he talks in the motion about agreeing to pay for funeral expenses that he's not going to be able to pay anyway. And believe me, I'm no Kohberger sympathizer, but I think we got to make sure we're being.
I don't know that. Hold on. Sydney Sumner joining me, Crime Stories investigative reporter. Sydney, we've seen over and over and over where convicted killers make money behind bars. They may zoom in from behind prison walls to a conference and get paid for it. They might write a book. They might, for Pete's sake, Sean Combs has been talking on a cell phone, a contraband cell phone behind bars since day one.
And it's ridiculous that people think that that Bryan Kohberger is running in here trying to weasel out of paying victims' family members his restitution that he agreed to in his plea deal if there wasn't money for him to make. He's not doing this for no reason. He's not doing this for no reason. There's something behind this. It's another way to harass the family members of his victims. It's another way to get back at his victims. But I also think that there is money on the table, and I think it's naive for us to think that there isn't. Let me see where we're at here. Disray says, I hope he gets zero compensation from a movie, and if he does, it belongs to the family. Right, and that's what the judge said. You know, when they were trying to say there was no, hey, Purple Angel, there's no way. Yeah, they suffered huge losses. They had, Ann Taylor, this was the defense team, is the one that moved this case from Latah County to Ada County. So then the family members had to pay to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And now they don't want to, now, the defense team doesn't want them to get reimbursed for this, and it's someday, right? Someday. BK thinks he's entitled. Yeah, I don't think this man has ever been held accountable, but it is just another way to harass the family members, right? It's another way to harass his victims. I just really hope that the judge throws the book at him for this, because I think, from my point of view, the good and decent people in Idaho, the tax-paying people of Idaho, have funded Bryan Kohberger's defense team. They have literally paid for him to have not one. Prosecution put one attorney up, not two. The defense team had 3 attorneys at this hearing. Three attorneys at the hearing to advocate for Bryan Kohberger. And the taxpayers in Idaho are paying the salaries, hourly rate, for 3 lawyers for Bryan Kohberger. Why did Ann Taylor and Alyssa Massoff and Becca Barlow all have to be present today? The prosecution only sent Bill Thompson. They didn't make the taxpayers of Idaho also pay for Ashley Jennings and, another lawyer. They just came with one person and did the bare minimum that they needed to do to make Bryan Kohberger, pay his bills that he agreed to. And, but the taxpayers of Idaho, I believe every single person who pays taxes in Idaho has paid around $5 and counting, $4 to $5 and counting, toward Bryan Kohberger's defense. Let that sink in. This man had like the best defense money could buy, and it was not funded by his family, who apparently are putting money on his commissary. They didn't contribute to his defense, but they have all this money to, but these family members are just this is just another way for Bryan Kohberger to harass his victims, and he's using his lawyers to do it. So why didn't they stand up and say, you know what, Bryan, this is a terrible idea? I hope that if he keeps pursuing stuff like this, I hope the judge does rescind his plea deal and we have to go forward with the trial. Because then what will come in is that Bryan Kohberger pled guilty to this, and it's going to be even worse for him. Ann says, no, but worrying the defense is arguing that the extra funeral costs for the urns will technically be out of time and that there had been a 60-day time limit imposed for those. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Truth Exposed says they end up transferring him to a state where he can get interviewed and make money off this. Right, exactly. I mean, Chris Watts worked with Sherilyn Cadle and wrote a book. I don't know if he got anything on his commissary for it. I bet he did. Dee Dee says BK is the lowest of the low. He stole those kids' lives, destroyed families who will suffer for generations, and he sits and whines because he has to pay his restitution. Yeah, and this is what he agreed to do. Dee Dee said he's trying to protect any money he might get so they don't just snatch all his money. Right, because a percentage of his commissary goes to the victims. A percentage of the commissary goes to the victims. Mike say, please, mods, please help in chat. Welcome others. Encourage others. Let's have a great live stream. Thank you to all our awesome mods today. Veronica says, and the public defender back in the office, Jay Luxon. Yeah, so that could have been, the prosecution could have showed up with 3 public defenders today. And, why is the defense team, why did they need 3 lawyers present? Ann Taylor didn't say anything. Becca Barlow didn't say anything. The only one who talked was Alyssa Massoff. So why were the other 2 there? Why do the good people of Idaho have to pay for this? Betsy says, every time Bryan wants to raise a legal issue, does Ann have to represent him? You know what? That's a great question. Let me find out. Let's find out. In the state of Idaho, in other issues. Let's find out. It's a great question. It says, now, according to AI, it says, the attorney is generally not obligated to represent their client after a trial is over for new issues, unless a specific post-trial agreement has, such as an appeal or sentencing, or it was part of the original representation agreement. However, a client may have grounds for ineffective assistance of counsel if the attorney's performance was deficient during the trial and prejudiced the outcome. Well, in this case, we didn't have a trial. So maybe because this plea deal was part of the original agreement, the attorneys, but did they all three need to show up? I guess is my question. Did we need to pay Ann Taylor and Becca Barlow and Alyssa Matzoff all because the prosecution just showed up with Bill Thompson, right? I want to say thank you to Dee Dee for being a channel member for 4 months. Thank you so much, Dee Dee. That's so awesome. Thank you to Heather for being a channel member for 4 months. Coverage and amazing mods. Thank you to NJAS for gifting a reporter room membership. That is so kind and generous of you. Thank you so much. If you got that membership, please make sure you say thank you to NJAS. I know that there are members only videos and members only live streams that are available on the channel. You're welcome to go through those. And I want to thank Texas Life Julie for being a reporter room channel member for 6 months. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank NJAS for gifting another reporter room membership. That is so kind of you. Thank you so much. Very, very kind of you. Let's see where we are. Veronica says she's surprised that Ann Taylor didn't take the lead on this. She's his lead attorney. Yeah, I'm not sure what, maybe she's working on another case, but, if she wasn't going to say anything, why be there? The other two didn't say anything. I don't think we needed to pay all of them to be there. Thank you, Jetset, for your input on that. Disarray says, I'm happy I finally made a live stream. I'm glad you did too. And Kathy says, thank you to the mods and chat. Yes, mods are us is our hashtag, mods are us. So thank you to all of our mods. Holly's modding today with Michael. This is our head mod, Michael, and our other head mod, NJAS. And Kathleen modded today. Thank you. If you're a mod, drop me a comment right now so I can shout you out. Purple Angel says, I've been a member for 12 months, I believe. Thank you so much, Purple Angel. Thank you so much for being a channel member. When it gets to your 12-month anniversary, I will get a notification from YouTube that lets me know. And NJAS the same. Thank you to Mods Are Us. Thank you. So really, thank you so much for your leadership, NJAS and Michael. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our, and Dee Dee says, we rock, Mods Are Us. Yeah, you do. Holly says, has been a member. See, I'll get a notification that looks like this. Once you're like on the anniversary of it, I'll get notified. So I want to thank Holly for if you're in the chat, I think you have to be in the chat for me to get the notification. Holly for being a channel member for 37 months. Wow, Holly. Thank you so much. Wow, that's a good long while. Really appreciate you. Thank you for modding today, Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for modding today, Purple Angel. Yeah, it's really cool. But if you like miss your anniversary for something, you can let me know, and I'm always happy to shout you out. And Michael, who's our head mod, says thank you. Thank you for being here to all our mods. And Jess says congratulations, Holly. Dee Dee, thank you so much. And Jess, thank you. Patty said Ann Taylor is working on the Skylar Me trial. Right. So that's probably why Alyssa Matzoff was making, all of the arguments today. But did Ann Taylor need to be there? I mean, I don't know. I guess she thought she did, but I'm not so sure. Anyway, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. I just want to thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me today. And if you haven't subscribed, it's free. I am going to be doing an anniversary show on this case. I will absolutely be doing a follow-up video when Judge Hippler comes back with his decision on this case. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.